Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Buenos días.
Good morning. The 9,493rd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is Threats to International Peace and Security. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Iraq to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Mr. Christian Richer, Special Advisor and Head of the Investigative Team established pursuant to Security Council Resolution 2379, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Mr. Christian Richer.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, I am pleased to present the 11th report of the United Nations Investigative Team to promote accountability for the crimes committed by Daesh, ISIL, or UNITAD. This report and my update to you today include significant milestones in the work of the team and comes at a critical juncture of the team itself and its future directions. As a priority, UNITAD remains committed to delivering on its core mandated task as stipulated in Resolution 2379 of 2017, conducted in line with the terms of reference. The team has equally taken steps since September to implement Resolution 2697 of 2023, which extends the mandate of UNITAD until 17 September 2024 only, and requests it to fulfill additional tasks towards the implementation of both resolutions. Over the past weeks, I have been working closely with our counterparts in the government of Iraq on this and wish to take a moment to specifically acknowledge the time, thought, and effort they have dedicated in this regard, their continued support of our work, and the constructive consultations we have started to follow up of Resolution 2697. This was apparent during a number of my meetings, particularly with the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, with the National Security Advisor, and the Chair of the National Coordinating Committee. I have also had the opportunity to speak with counterparts in the Kurdistan Regional Government, KRG, who have been equally supportive and forthcoming in their views. In these meetings and elsewhere, I have sought to underline how UNITAD has adjusted its priorities against the backdrop of these two resolutions and articulate the concerns the team has for its work based on the current timeline ahead of it. One such priority has been to ensure that our investigations conclude in a deliberate and orderly manner, so that a body of meaningful outputs produced by the team can be used effectively to serve international criminal investigations and proceedings, both in Iraq and beyond. To this end, during the reporting period, the team finalized and shared a comprehensive case assessment report on the development and use of chemical weapons by ISIL with the Iraqi judiciary. This includes extensive investigative findings based on 3 years of dedicated fieldwork. This report is a milestone in our pioneering line of investigations that examines how ISIL developed and deployed chemical weapons in Iraq, including against the Shia Turkmen minority in the town of Taza Kormatu. Furthermore, the team published a comprehensive assessment detailing the heinous crimes of sexual violence perpetrated by ISIL during their brutal reign. The report was published yesterday and highlights the extensive nature of these acts against Iraqi women and girls from all affected communities. This accompanies case assessments shared previously with Iraqi judicial counterparts focused on ISIL's financing network, and those are the forthcoming from other investigations, notably the crimes committed against the Yazidi and Christian communities, the attack on Badouche prison, and the massacre of unarmed military personnel and cadets at the Tikrit Air Academy known as Camp Spiker. It is important to underline that when these assessments are shared, they are delivered in line with our mandate and the terms of reference. More broadly, investigative resources of the team have been shifted to expedite less advanced investigations and their planned outputs. I have aimed to underline this shift in our investigative strategy to my counterparts in Iraq, and I formally shared a list of expected investigative reports over the coming months. However, it is important to keep in mind that despite a shift of resources and intensifying our efforts, it will likely be the case that by September 2024, the team will not be able to deliver final outputs on all lines of inquiry it has initiated, but will only be able to deliver preliminary findings for those lines of investigations rather than comprehensive reports. Further, the team will also be deprioritizing what cannot be completed within 1 year. This includes some key but complex investigations such as the crimes committed by ISIL in Mosul, ISIL's destruction of cultural heritage, the pillaging of oil and other natural resources in Iraq by ISIL, the question of ISIL's genocidal intent against the Shia community, and the team's work on Al-Hol returnees, a file that is expected to need years of work in Iraq and elsewhere. Most probably, none of the outputs of these different investigative lines will be designed to be an end outcome. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, I highlighted during my previous briefing in June how the work of the team should not just establish a record of international crimes committed by ISIL, but must be used to hold ISIL members who committed such crimes to account, through evidence-based trials and before competent courts in Iraq as well as in third states. A practical example serving this purpose is what UNITAD has been doing based on its investigative work through the team's cooperation with the Iraqi judiciary to develop joint case files of alleged ISIL perpetrators in third states. During the reporting period, the first such joint case file was developed and shared with the concerned third state. This supported investigations into an alleged ISIL perpetrator for international crimes committed in Iraq and ultimately helped lead to the arrest of this suspect. The team intends to carry forward with this joint modality as it represents a framework through which the team and Iraq can meaningfully and closely cooperate, share information, and put to use their respective evidence and knowledge to hold ISIL members accountable for their international crimes. In parallel, UNITAD remains committed to supporting Iraq establish a legal basic domestically to investigate and prosecute international crimes. During the reporting period, the team worked hand in hand with Iraqi counterparts through this Iraq-led process and provided a series of technical comments on a proposed draft legislation and its alignment with international law and customary law. Just in September of this year, UNITAD organized a workshop for Iraqi lawmakers and legal experts, which was hosted by the Iraqi Council of Representatives. 2 prominent international law experts presented and discussed with national stakeholders details regarding the needed legal framework and principles relevant to this process of a domestication of international criminal law in Iraq. The establishment of such a legal basis for international crimes would open new horizons for Iraq as it paves the way for trials against ISIL perpetrators on such charges, with the participation of Iraqi victims and witnesses. This is not only what UNITAD is meant to support, but also the main demand of victim and survivor communities in Iraq, to see their day in court. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, the work of the team is not only about investigations, but also about evidence management. One of our priorities in this regard during the reporting period has been to position our evidence collection, preservation, and management capabilities to support what will be agreed in light of the upcoming report of the Secretary General and the roadmap which UNITAD will develop in consultation with the government of Iraq as requested in Resolution 2697. UNITAD holdings currently contain 39 terabytes of information that has been collected over the last 5 years from a diverse range of sources, a substantial amount of data. This includes records collected from Iraqi authorities, which is the vast majority, from civil society organizations and open sources, as well as statements and other materials collected from individuals in Iraq, mostly witnesses. A large majority of this reservoir of evidence has been processed onto the electronic discovery platform of the team and is accessed daily by its investigators, lawyers, and analysts for their work. Some of this data has been collected by the team, however, has yet to be processed into this platform. During the reporting period, additional evidence was added to these holdings, notably through cooperation with the Iraqi judiciary in the area of digital forensics, digitization and archiving, as well as forensic data obtained through the excavation of a dozen of new mass graves in support of the Iraqi Mass Grave Directorate and Medical Legal Directorate. What will happen with these holdings and how it can be shared with Iraq remains at the heart of Resolution 2697. The team looks forward to further guidance to this end in the upcoming report of the Secretary General next month and intends to further develop the roadmap and consultation with the government of Iraq based on this. During those consultations, the team stands ready to articulate the core principles that have guided its evidence collection, storage, and respective sharing with counterparts. UNITAD adheres to these principles to ensure the broadest possible use and admissibility of evidence before national courts and by national investigative and prosecutorial authorities, as set out in its terms of reference. Over the past years, the team has successfully maintained and managed this reservoir of evidence holdings and provided support accordingly. We have worked on specific requests for assistance to support specific investigations and shared tailored information in line with the team's mandate. When it comes to sharing, the team examines whether the requesting national judicial authority has the jurisdiction and competence to hold ISIL accountable for acts that may amount to war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide. This is done on a case-by-case basis, and support has been provided when there is a prospect for international crimes charges and the information provider grants consent to such sharing. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, when I assumed my responsibilities as special advisor, my firm belief was that Iraq is the main ally and partner of UNITAD. This has not changed at all. The Council knows best that the consent of the host government in any given context is key for a UN mission to conduct its work. But I would like to stress that it is even more crucial for an investigative team with a unique mandate, such as UNITAD. Since the beginning, the team has been working in Iraq at the request of its government and in partnership with Iraqi counterparts to investigate ISIL crimes against all affected communities in the country. We have conducted our work accordingly with full respect to the sovereignty of Iraq and will continue to do so. It remains up to Iraq to exercise its sovereign right to decide on the future of this mission. However, let me stress that a premature and abrupt ending of UNITAD can only mean a loss for all those concerned. This is why I urge the government of Iraq and the esteemed members of this council to give due consideration to the end state of our mandate more than the end date. Over the next weeks and months, I will continue to work closely with all Iraqi counterparts to furnish possibilities and present different scenarios. It will be up to Iraq to choose an option. We will, of course, abide by that choice. While UNITAD was never meant to last forever, we all have a collective responsibility to ensure that the work it has done will not be lost. I was particularly encouraged to hear from the chair of the National Coordinating Committee, Dr. Zaidan Khalaf Al-Atwani, recently that we are on the same page. Our shared goal is to ensure that the work of the team can be used to support accountability efforts in Iraq and throughout the world. We also agreed that the capacity building and support the team is providing to Iraqi authorities must not only continue, but also intensify to ensure that national capacities remain sustainable and operational over the long term. This includes areas such as digital forensics, evidence preservation and management, and mass grave excavations, as well as technical assistance with the Witness Protection Department within the Iraqi Ministry of Interior, and trainings to local NGOs and the Ministry of Health in the area of psychosocial support. All this support which UNITAD provides has continued to progress during the reporting period. The team has relentlessly endeavored to better enable national counterparts to conduct their work independently and without the involvement of the team in the future. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, one of the most tangible outputs of UNITAD is its support to third state investigations and prosecutions. This ensures that the gap in global accountability does not expand and further allow impunity to persist. The team has supported 209 requests from 20 third states to date, and the demand for this support has been growing and can only be expected to grow. Whether with regard to ISIL foreign fighters who have returned to their countries of origin, ISIL spouses who claim they had no idea about ISIL's reign of terror, or perpetrators who have fled Iraq to seek safe havens abroad, the large number of ISIL perpetrators around the globe will only fuel this demand. We must not forget that many of those perpetrators were very young when committing their crimes and may face investigation and charges for international crimes in the decade to come. The function that UNITAD here fulfills, cross-checking against its evidence holdings, identifying witnesses and taking testimony to support third states, is a concrete measure of global accountability by any stretch and a monumental step in combating impunity. To a large extent, investigations and trials against ISIL perpetrators who try to escape justice would not be possible in these countries if my team hadn't provided legal assistance. It has always been our goal to close impunity gaps throughout the world. ISIL perpetrators who committed heinous mass atrocities against Iraqi citizens must not remain unpunished wherever they try to hide. I personally, in my former capacity as a federal prosecutor and head of a war crimes unit in Germany, was glad to benefit from the expertise of a responsive investigative team. UNITAD has always been able to close the gaps within the chain of proof. Thus, the team significantly contributed to convictions of ISIL defendants throughout the world. Let me stress here that I commend the commitment of Iraq to support our cooperation with third states. With the approval of the Chief Justice, Foreign Minister, and the Chair of the National Coordinating Committee, I am pleased to note that an agreed modality which better outlines the team's evidence sharing with third states has been concluded per Resolution 2697. The team also worked during the reporting period to better communicate to the government of Iraq what previous evidence has been shared with third states, again as per Resolution 2697, and remains engaged with all relevant counterparts to this end. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, let me conclude my remarks with a reflection based on my recent engagements with affected communities in Iraq, those who are the victims and witnesses of ISIL and its heinous crimes. They are the ones who see the work of UNITAD as a beacon of hope, and an opportunity to have their voices heard, their suffering acknowledged, and their stories told. They are the ones demanding that the crimes from which they suffered are adjudicated in international crimes, whether it concerns alleged acts of genocide, of war crimes, or of crimes against humanity. I was reminded of this during a recent discussion with a father of a Camp Speicher victim who founded, with other impacted families, an NGO dedicated to serving justice for the beloved ones who are the victims of that atrocious massacre. I was reminded of this during a mission to Anbar, where I stood together with local officials, tribal leaders, survivors, and civil society representatives at the crime scene of ISIL massacres against Sunnis who refused to pledge allegiance. The completion phase of the investigative team should not mean that their hope for justice and their quest for accountability dims with it. A meaningful completion of our mandate and an orderly transition must be a guarantee for them. We must ensure that those who had the courage to speak up against ISIL crimes are not let down or left behind. We must make certain that their security is assured, that they are protected, and that the trauma they have endured because of what they have experienced and seen can be addressed. And we must ensure that those who have not spoken up yet but want to exercise their right to come forward can do so of their own accord in a safe and welcoming forum. We must keep the common goal of serving justice for those victims and survivors in our heart and mind as we continue to implement the resolutions of this esteemed Council and our collective work. I thank you kindly for your attention and your continued support.
Doy las gracias al señor Richter.
I thank Mr. Richer for the information provided. I will now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I would like to thank the Special Advisor for his latest report and for all of the work of the UNITAD team. The United Kingdom continues to value UNITAD's important contribution to holding members of Daesh accountable for their appalling crimes. We welcome the progress that UNITAD has made since the last briefing. As we've heard, it has concluded 2 reports on critical issues: sexual violence against women and girls, and the development and use of chemical weapons by Daesh. It has delivered 80 field missions and digitized a further 5 million records. And we welcome UNITAD's important capacity building work, including training on witness protection and victim-centered approaches to evidence collection, as well as supporting mass grave excavations. All of this is vital to bringing justice and accountability for victims and survivors, while supporting the Iraqi government in its modernization of judicial processes and of investigatory work. We strongly encourage UNITAD and the government of Iraq to find a way forward for third-party evidence sharing, as this Council requested in Resolution 2697, which is so critical to ensuring members of Daesh cannot escape impunity by fleeing abroad. We also encourage UNITAD to continue working to improve evidence sharing with the Iraqi authorities and to plan for the future. However, we do recognise that the sharing of sensitive evidence is not straightforward, as it is often subject to, amongst other things, the consent of witnesses. We hope the upcoming report of the Secretary-General will provide clarity on these matters so that the Council and Iraq can properly understand what evidence has been and can be shared, and how the Council, UNITAD and the Government of Iraq could make further progress on this. It is critical that the evidence collected by UNITAD continues to be available for prosecutions of international crimes. President, we all agree here on the importance of accountability for Daesh crimes. We owe that to the victims, as the Special Advisor has said. For our part, the United Kingdom is committed to working closely with the Government of Iraq and the United Nations to ensure UNITAD's unique work is used effectively, both in Iraq and around the world. We are grateful to the Special Advisor and his team for their dedicated efforts in pursuit of accountability, and we stand with the Government of Iraq in our continued cooperation to deliver justice for Daesh atrocities. Thank you.
Agradezco al representante.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom. I now give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Thank you, Mr. President. I express my gratitude to Special Advisor Richard for the comprehensive briefing, and I would also like to emphasize that Albania appreciates UNITAD's commendable efforts in Iraq as articulated in the 11th report of the Special Advisor. We extend a warm welcome to the Iraqi representative participating in today's meeting. In the face of persistent threat of terrorism to peace and security, UNITAD's pivotal role in gathering evidence and constructing cases against Daesh and its affiliates is crucial. Albania acknowledges the progress achieved by UNITAD amidst numerous challenges and resource constraints. Notably, we applaud the completion of case assessment reports on gender and sexual crimes against the Yazidi community and the acquisition of new evidence regarding the development and use of biological and chemical weapons by Daesh. The significance of the assessment report on the use of chemical and biological weapons by Daesh cannot be overstated. It marks a precedent illustrating the alarming extent to which non-state actors can pose real and unprecedented threats. We also appreciate the advancement of investigations, particularly in identifying high-ranking Daesh officials and gathering evidence related to mass murder, enslavement of women and girls, rape, and other heinous crimes. The completion of case files and the alignment of names with committed crimes bring hope to victims and their families, assuring them that justice is on the horizon. We wholeheartedly support these efforts. While acknowledging the strides made, we recognize that more needs to be done in identifying perpetrators, collecting evidence, and ensuring that all those responsible for atrocity crimes in Iraq face justice. We echo the team's assessment that investigations and case assessments reports cannot be concluded by September 2024. Additional resources and the full engagement of the Iraqi authorities are indispensable for the pursuit of justice through fair and due process. Looking ahead, we anticipate the Secretary General's report and subsequent recommendations on how to proceed in alignment with Resolution 2697. We urge this Council to act collaboratively with Iraq in providing ample time and resources for comprehensive justice to be delivered for all crimes. Albania lends its support to the enhanced coordination between UNITAD and the Iraqi authorities, affected communities, civil society, victims, and their families. The team's ongoing engagement with survivors groups, civil society, and academia is commendable, as it amplifies victims' voices and contributes to gathering more evidence. Mr. President, in conclusion, I underscore that holding Daesh perpetrators accountable for crimes in Iraq remains a work in progress. Iraq must receive all necessary assistance to end impunity. We call upon this Council to steadfastly support UNITAD and Iraq in enhancing the legislative framework for international crimes, capacity building for victims and survivors willing to testify, collaboration on mass grave excavations, and the establishment of the central digitized archive. We align with the view that Team's 5 years of dedicated work must culminate in bringing perpetrators of atrocity crimes to the court of law. This is essential for ensuring meaningful justice and preventing the resurgence of Daesh and its affiliates in Iraq and beyond. In closing, as this marks our final address on this topic in the Council, I reiterate Albania's unwavering commitment to justice and accountability as the bedrock for lasting peace and prosperity for the Iraqi people. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Albania. I now give the floor to the representative of Ghana.
President, I wish to thank the Special Advisor for presenting the 11th report of UNITAD and for the work of the entire UNITAD team. Ghana welcomes the progress made by the team during the period under review in pursuit of accountability for serious crimes committed by Daesh ISIL we hold the view that sustaining our commitment to the meaningful advancement of justice and accountability for all the atrocities committed by Daesh/ISIL is the only way to respond to the legitimate calls by survivors and victims of ISIL's crimes for justice and genuine national reconciliation. In this regard, I would like to highlight the following points. First, we applaud UNITAD's efforts to build on the progress that was made in previous reporting periods in advancing investigations in its line of inquiry. The preparation and sharing of case assessment reports on the manufacturing and use of chemical weapons by Daesh/ISIL, preparation of reports on sexual violence against women and girls committed by Daesh/ISIL, and the advanced updates on case assessment reports on crimes committed against the Christian community represents significant achievements in this regard. UNITAD's commitment to share the analytical and structural findings regarding the various investigations with the Iraqi judiciary in the upcoming reporting period is a significant next step. We welcome this development and trust that the enrichment of evidentiary material will support domestic investigations and prosecutions and ensure that there is no impunity for the heinous international crimes committed by Daesh. Secondly, Ghana applauds the continued cooperation between UNITAD and the government of Iraq, including Iraqi judicial authorities. We are pleased to observe that UNITAD continues to focus its efforts on building the capacities of relevant Iraqi stakeholders through training on digital forensic methods and support for mass grave excavations. Indeed, thanks to the efforts of UNITAD, domestic capacity is being enhanced for the investigation and prosecution of crimes committed by Daesh, even as holdings of documentary, testimonial, and digital evidence have been enriched in support of such investigations and prosecutions. Third, we know that the current report indicates the activities being undertaken by UNITAD in response to Resolution 2697. We recognize that UNITAD is not only adjusting its priorities to meet the mandate request, but has successfully determined modalities for information sharing with third states and also communicated to the Iraqi authorities on what previous evidence had been shared with third states. In addition, we know that following initial discussions with the government of Iraq, the team plans to focus on preparing a roadmap for the completion of its mandate and necessary steps for closure in line with the request of the government of Iraq. As the team undertakes these steps, we acknowledge that its work in pursuing justice will not be completed in a meaningful way by September 2024. However, it is important that despite the challenges that UNITAD foresees in the non-completion of its work, the team will endeavor to work with the government of Iraq to ensure that the expectations of the host government on the future of the team are fully met. In this way, we will be able to maintain the credibility of the Iraqi people to take the accountability process forward, and also in recognition of UNITAD's role in this process. Mr. President, this being the last scheduled briefing on UNITAD before the end of our present term, allow me to take the opportunity to applaud UNITAD for the milestones it has reached towards the fulfillment of its mandate to promote accountability for core crimes committed by Daesh/ISIL. One thing is evident: the establishment of an international investigative team, as in the case of UNITAD, can yield positive results and offers useful lessons for global accountability. We reiterate our expectations for success in the common pursuit of justice and accountability. I thank you.
Agradezco al
I thank the representative of Ghana for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, the Russian Federation attributes great significance to the question of countering terrorism and holding terrorists accountable for their crimes. This is an integral component of our shared efforts to counter terrorist threats. In this context, we scrupulously monitor the activities of the United Nations investigative team to promote accountability for crimes committed by Daesh/ISIL in Iraq. We note the efforts of the team in the latest reporting period in contributing to the evidence holdings of Daesh ISIL crimes in all areas of the investigation, including crimes against national communities, killings in Tikrit, Sinjar, destruction of cultural property, as well as financial flows of ISIL and Daesh. We are heartened by the fact that at least at the 7th year of its work, the team has finally shared with the Iraqi authorities some of the material compiled on the manufacturing and use by terrorists of chemical weapons, as well as information about sexual violence. We wish to recall the fact that there are fewer than not 10 months left prior to the completion of the mandate of UNITAD. We are surprised at the fact that against this backdrop, Iraq has only received a paltry share of what the group has managed to of what the team has managed to accumulate. And in fact, we fail to fully understand why was this evidence not consistently provided to the Iraqi authorities? Why have we only reached this point now? A legitimate question arises: for whom and why then was this evidence compiled if the Iraqi judiciary system was not able to receive this? We often hear that thanks to the assistance of UNITAD, certain individuals are being held to account in third, largely Western countries, but were singular trials held abroad were the end goal of the mandate of UNITAD. The main objective of UNITAD, as was set out by the Security Council, provides for providing assistance to Iraq, first and foremost and specifically in prosecuting ISIL representatives. Ambivalence in the question of handover of evidence accumulated to Baghdad has resulted in the fact that thousands of terrorists have not yet been held duly accountable. As we understand, much of the credit for this unfortunate state of affairs lies with the predecessor of the current special advisor. Whereas during the tenure of Mr. Richer, we have observed some progress in the implementation of the core mandate of the investigative team, Mr. Khan has for years openly disregarded this, merely mimicking fervent activity, as we see. As far as we understand, during this period, Iraq has received absolutely nothing from UNITAD, or what? We would like to now ask at the Security Council how many trials were held in Iraq with respect to terrorists on the basis of the evidence gathered by UNITAD. Was there even one such trial? Well, of course, we couldn't expect anything better from the British citizen, Mr. Khan. At his new workplace, he continues to do the same, to prioritize and deprioritize certain investigations based on the desire of his Western patrons. We believe that had the investigative team from the very beginning of its operations conscientiously complied with the mandate entrusted to it to support national efforts of law enforcement and judicial bodies in Iraq, providing them with full evidence, then the Iraqi judicial system would have already completed the process of holding terrorists to account. 7 years is a long time. Let us recall that the Nuremberg trials took only 1.5 years. We demand that all of the material, without exception, accumulated by the investigative team, including in digitized form, and the relevant analytical findings, for them to be without delay and without any preconditions hand over to the Iraqi authorities, as is stipulated in Resolution 2379, as was reaffirmed in Resolution 2697. Let us recall, at the request of the government of Iraq, the Security Council, through Resolution 2697, extended UNITAD's mandate for only 1 year, until 17 September 2024. This underscores the need to, as effectively as possible, use the time remaining. We trust that UNITAD will rigorously step up its cooperation with Baghdad. We wish to draw attention to the fact that the statement on shortcomings in legislation cannot and should not be used as a pretext to prevent the implementation of the instructions from the Security Council. We, with alarm, just heard a statement that UNITAD will not manage to complete its work prior to the completion of its mandate. We believe that the mission should comply with the instructions of the Council. We value the report, the announcement that in pursuance of paragraph 5 of Resolution 2697, it was possible to expeditiously agree with the Iraqi authorities on the modalities of transfer of evidence to third countries. We trust that this step will help to ensure compliance with the need for securing the consent of Baghdad for such transfers in the future, and the information about the implementation of the other paragraphs in the resolution is, in our view, insufficient at the same time. There has been virtually no information on a crucial question of the course of the completion of the activities of the investigative team. We expect that these deficiencies will be fully corrected in the Secretary General's January report and the Special Advisor's March roadmap. We trust that in these documents we will see detailed descriptions of specific measures that were already adopted or will be adopted in the remaining 10 months of work for the expedited transfer of evidence to the Iraqis and for the drawdown of the activities of UNITAD. There's a need to pay particular attention to the step-by-step description of the process of this drawdown. To conclude, we wish to stress that now the investigative team has a final opportunity to fulfill the main part of its mandate, to finally hand over all of the evidence to the Iraqi authorities. Without this, its mission will hardly be deemed a success. Thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco a la representante.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. I now give the floor to the representative of Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Special Advisor and Head of UNITAD, Mr. Christian Richer, for his briefing, and I welcome the Iraqi delegation to this meeting. The 11th report on the activities of UNITAD comes at a critical juncture. We are less than a year away from the expiration of UNITAD's latest and possibly final mandated term. The decision by the Council last September to extend UNITAD's mandate for 1 year only, 6 years after Resolution 2379 determined its creation, responded to several concerns indicated by Iraq in its 5th September letter to the Council. The latest mandate renewal acknowledged the need to advance decisively and expeditiously towards the completion of UNITAD's core task, to support accountability efforts before Iraqi tribunals. Those tribunals, as well as the people and the government of Iraq, continue to be the primary intended beneficiaries of UNITAD's investigative work. Some of the alleged difficulties in accomplishing that goal within the allotted time frame could unduly imply that UNITAD's role is to supervise and constrain rather than support trials in Iraq. Therefore, in the development of a roadmap for the completion of UNITAD's mandate, expected by March next year, it will be essential to consider that the holding of criminal proceedings in Iraq will surely build upon and outlive UNITAD's contribution to future trials in the country. The gist of that contribution remains the collection and sharing of evidence of Daesh's crimes in Iraq with the Iraq authorities. Likewise, Brazil trusts that the upcoming Secretary General's recommendations on evidence sharing with the government of Iraq will also maximize UNITAD's chances to deliver and exhaust its core mandate as determined by the Council by September 2024. Bearing in mind the basis on which UNITAD's mandate rests, progress in this direction would strengthen the existing partnership with the host country and eventually indicate the importance of continued collaboration with Iraq based on consent should all parties converge in this direction. Mr. President, the timely determination of modalities for UNITAD's sharing of evidence with third states with the approval of the government of Iraq bodes well for the goal of holding Daesh members accountable, including those who fled the country. This should be done in a manner that respects Iraqi sovereignty and jurisdiction over crimes committed in its territory and against its citizens. Brazil commends the government of Iraq for its constructive engagement with UNITAD and third states aimed at enabling the prosecution of suspected criminals abroad who are otherwise subject to the primary or dominant jurisdiction of Iraq. Finally, we acknowledge UNITAD's contribution to strengthening the capacity of Iraqi institutions responsible for the administration of justice in the country as part of efforts to promote accountability for Daesh's crimes. Following the completion of UNITAD's mandate, capacity building initiatives tailored to local needs could continue to be provided and pursued bilaterally upon the request of Iraq by interested countries, including those who currently offer extra budgetary funds to UNITAD for this purpose. Thank you.
Agradezco al representante.
I thank the representative of Brazil. I now give the floor to the representative of Gabon.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Mr. President. I also would like to thank you for organizing this briefing, focusing on the 9th report of the activities carried out by the United Nations investigation team, UNITAD, tasked with holding Daesh accountable for crimes committed in Iraq between 2014 and 2017, which fall under the framework of Resolution 2379 of the 21st of September 2017. I'd also like to thank Mr. Christian Richer for the very detailed information that he provided on the progress of the investigations underway under the period under consideration. And I also welcome the representative of Iraq amongst us. Gabon supports the strategy set up by the Security Council to prevent the proliferation and use of chemical weapons by non-state and state actors as well as by terrorist organizations. The accountability mechanisms established in Iraq and which are based on criminal justice and the rule of law are essential for the maintenance of international peace and security. Gabon welcomes the fact that this mechanism makes it possible to promote the fight against impunity and to guarantee access to justice for the local communities impacted by war crimes, by crimes against humanity and the crimes of genocide committed by Daesh against the Yazidi people in Iraq. We also welcome the notable progress that has been made as part of the in-depth investigations as they have progressed to strengthen the judicial capacity and local jurisdiction of the Kurdish entities. We also welcome the adoption of Resolution 2697, and we welcome all the efforts of the team aimed at adjusting the priorities that will make it possible to achieve the goals arising from the terms of reference of its mandate. In this regard, close cooperation and the strengthening of the capacities of the local judicial authorities, in particular the residual tasks, must lead to a rigorous handover of cases to the Iraqi authorities, bearing in mind the deadlines and the importance of the work that is being done by the special team. The strengthening of the spirit of mutual cooperation between UNITAD and the member states affected by these investigative procedures is particularly encouraging. That will make it possible in the long term to have a greater involvement of the jurisdictions of these countries in the procedures underway. The stress placed by the team on the ground on strengthening cooperation with the Iraqi judicial authorities, with, in particular, the support of the stakeholders with regard to the crimes committed by Daesh against the Christian community and those related to the presumed use of chemical and biological weapons, must be maintained until the end of the mission. That is why the new digital evidence obtained is essential, because it makes it possible to clarify the impact of the chemical weapons and biological weapons attacks committed by Daesh against the victims, leading to material damage and damage to the environment. Gabon would like to urgently appeal for a follow-up of the measures aimed at facilitating the use and admissibility of the evidence gathered and processed and preserved and passed on by the team on the ground in order to facilitate the prosecution of the perpetrators of these crimes. Mr. President, the judicious use of cutting-edge technologies, in particular new strategies aimed at speeding up the scanning and digitalization of documents, aimed at establishing the evidence throughout the period under consideration, as well as the technical training of local legal staff to use these latest tools, is essential as we begin to address the end of the mandate of the special team. A stepping up of the dialogue in this sensitive context is fundamental, and Gabon hopes that the government in Baghdad will engage even more in the indispensable cooperation needed in order to finalize the inquiries and strengthen the framework of guidelines in the Memorandum of Understanding. Moreover, the involvement of civil society remains indispensable, in particular in providing assistance to the victims of sexual violence, as well as to the children that have suffered mistreatment and abuse as part of their enlistment as child soldiers. In conclusion, Mr. President, my delegation would like to underscore the urgent need to create conditions that will provide for restorative justice for the violations inflicted on the people of Iraq, in particular the Yazidi communities, as part of the war crimes and crimes of genocide and crimes against humanity committed by Daesh. It is essential that we adopt an inclusive approach, in particular during this final stage of the process, in order to maximize the processing of the information collected, which will make it possible to establish once and for all the facts. Moreover, since it's our last contribution that we will be making, we'd like to reconfirm all of our support for the tireless and remarkable efforts of the team. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Agradezco la representación.
I thank the representative of Gabon. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to take this opportunity to wish you every success during your presidency. I thank the Special Advisor for the presentation of the 11th report on UNITAD. I welcome the presence of the Permanent Representative of Iraq, which illustrates Iraq's commitment to cooperation with the international community and with UNITAD to ensure that justice be rendered for all of the victims of the crimes perpetrated by Daesh on its territory. We welcome the work of the entire UNITAD team. We renew our support for their efforts which contribute to countering impunity. Mr. President, thanks to the efforts of UNITAD on the ground, alongside national and local authorities, more progress has been achieved. New evidence has been gathered on crimes perpetrated by Daesh, specifically crimes perpetrated against various religious communities, but also crimes perpetrated with the use of chemical weapons. We applaud UNITAD's drafting of a thematic report, a report dedicated to sexual and gender-based violence. We also welcome progress on dealing with crimes committed against children and specifically girls, some of whom have been pushed into forced marriages or sexual slavery. We applaud the collection of digital data related to Daesh's activities online and the continued efforts to digitize the necessary elements of proof for investigations. This progress is crucial to avoid the loss or deterioration of evidence, and this should be continued. Elements gathered on Daesh financing networks are also crucial. We applaud the efforts underway with respect to the study focused on the destruction of cultural heritage. We emphasize UNITAD's commitment alongside Iraqi civil society. Dialogue with civil society is crucial. This helps to gather valuable evidence to progress investigations and to shed light on the gravity and scope of crimes perpetrated by Daesh. I wish to highlight the importance of cooperation in countering impunity when it comes to crimes perpetrated by Daesh. In this regard, we welcomed the enhanced cooperation between UNITAD and the Iraqi government. Actions related to awareness raising about the mandate of the mechanism are also important. We encourage the Iraqi authorities and UNITAD to continue their dialogue, including when it comes to the sharing of evidence with third states. We will closely study the recommendations that the Secretary General will submit in January, pursuant to Resolution 2697. France calls upon all states to support UNITAD's work. We are pleased and proud to deliver our support to UNITAD through voluntary contributions and technical cooperation in order to assist the mechanism in its evidence collection work. There is an important need also to recall the steadfast position of the United Nations vis-à-vis non-transmission of elements for judicial proceedings that are liable to result in sentences of capital punishment, regardless of where this may take place. We wish to recall that victims should remain our main concern. A victim-centered approach, as well as gender perspective adopted by UNITAD in all of its work, are crucial. Countering impunity for all perpetrators of crimes is imperative for stabilization, recovery, and reconciliation of the Iraqi people as a whole. For this reason, France established a joint investigative team with Sweden under the aegis of Eurojust in January 2022, focusing on crimes perpetrated against the Yazidi people, and we have been cooperating with UNITAD teams in this regard. Lastly, France reiterates our commitment to countering terrorism and countering impunity. The threat posed by Daesh has not evaporated, as is often recalled, alongside partners, specifically the International Coalition Against Daesh, which will meet tomorrow at the ministerial level in Riyadh. France will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Iraq in the fight against terrorism. Thank you.
Francia.
I thank the representative of France. I now give the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Permettez-moi tout d'abord de remercier le conseiller.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Special Advisor Richer and his team for their briefing, and I welcome the representative of Iraq at the meeting. Switzerland welcomes the continued progress made during the period under review by the investigation team to promote accountability for the crimes committed by Daesh. We also would like to commend UNITAD and the Iraqi government for their respective efforts and close cooperation in implementing the provisions of Resolution 2697. The main objective of UNITAD remains entirely valid. Switzerland considers the following aspects to be key to UNITAD's mandate and work. Firstly, the exchange of evidence with third countries, which is an integral part of UNITAD's mandate, is important for the prosecution of terrorism-related crimes worldwide. Switzerland welcomes the cooperation between UNITAD and the Iraqi government in determining the modalities of future evidence sharing with third countries. At the same time, it remains essential that this exchange respect international law and the principles of the rule of law. Switzerland is opposed to the death penalty in all circumstances, as it is incompatible with respect for human rights and human dignity. Consequently, we oppose the sharing of evidence in judicial proceedings that could lead to capital punishment. Secondly, accountability and justice are essential pillars for preventing atrocities and building lasting peace based on trust. We appreciate UNITAD's ongoing efforts to achieve this goal by thoroughly investigating and documenting the many crimes perpetrated by Daesh in Iraq. We particularly value their victim-centered approach as well as their perpetrator-centered investigations. The documentation and evaluation of cases of sexual crimes, particularly against women and girls from minority communities, is essential to ensure accountability. In this context, I would like to highlight a report by the Counter-Terrorism Committee Executive Directorate that was recently published in partnership with Switzerland. This report highlights that sexual and gender-based violence, human trafficking, sexual slavery, and forced marriage are used as weapons of terror by Daesh. Impunity for these serious crimes hinders justice for victims and survivors and destroys the social fabric. It is essential to criminalize in national legislation international crimes, particularly those related to sexual and gender-based violence. In addition, independent courts are essential to hold the perpetrators of Daesh accountable for their crimes. We welcome UNITAD's collaboration with the Iraqi authorities and encourage the government to adopt such national legislation as soon as possible. Thirdly, we note the Special Advisor's assessment that UNITAD's mandate will not be completed to a significant extent by September 2024. Switzerland is concerned about the risk that certain essential investigations will not be finalized on time and that requests for mutual assistance from the national authorities of third states will go unanswered. Legal proceedings take time. This reinforces our expectation that the Iraqi government will ensure that these crimes committed by Daesh will continue to be prosecuted in accordance with international law and the principles of the rule of law. Mr. President, international cooperation is essential to bring the perpetrators of all the crimes committed to justice. At the same time, long-term initiatives are needed to bring about reconciliation and to prevent the recurrence of violence. The work of UNITAD is a key element in this effort. Thank you. I thank the representative of Switzerland. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Special Advisor Risher, for your briefing on UNITAD's efforts to ensure accountability for Daesh's heinous crimes in Iraq. I also welcome the Iraqi ambassador to this meeting of the Council. After the Security Council heeded Iraq's request in 2017 to partner with the United Nations to establish UNITAD, the United States has consistently supported its mission, and we continue to do so. The United States welcomed the extension of UNITAD's mandate until September 2024 and Iraq's continued commitment to work with UNITAD. In keeping with that mandate, members of the Security Council must continue to assess UNITAD's progress. We must, however, be clear-eyed about the implications of a hasty and premature closure of UNITAD as Iraq continues its transition from conflict to stability and prosperity. UNITAD continues, UNITAD continues to provide support to Iraqi authorities by building the capacity of the Iraqi judicial system, facilitating mass grave exhumations, collecting evidence, engaging victims' families and survivors, and conducting analysis of battlefield evidence to help identify perpetrators of atrocities. The work that UNITAD is doing is critical to holding members of ISIS accountable for genocide against Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslims, and for crimes against humanity directed at these same groups, and in some cases also against Sunni Muslims, Kurds, and other minorities. After nearly 10 years, these communities continue to yearn for justice. We acknowledge the government of Iraq's desire for UNITAD to share additional evidence that it has collected for use by the Iraqi judicial system and UNITAD's efforts with the government of Iraq to make this possible. To that end, we look forward to the Secretary General's report outlining specific actions UNITAD and Iraq can agree on to ensure such evidence sharing takes place. In the meantime, we understand there was both an analytical report on sexual violence against women and girls and an assessment report on the Daesh-ISIL's manufacturing and deployment of chemical weapons, both shared with the Iraqi authorities in October and November 2023. We stress the importance of UNITAD's role in providing information and evidence to third-party nations such as the United States. UNITAD's recent investigation into the manufacture and use of chemical weapons by ISIS was one such important, albeit disturbing, example. UNITAD's evidence sharing with other countries in support of prosecutions of ISIS members abroad is an essential element of its work. The fight against ISIS will not be complete until the ISIS perpetrators of atrocities are held accountable wherever they may be. We should recognize that UNITAD continues to be a good example of how the UN can support post-conflict countries on a path to peace and security. For this reason, we need to be ready to continue its work in Iraq beyond the upcoming year, should the demand remain. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Arab Emirates.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I would like to thank the Special Advisor, Mr. Christian Richer, for his comprehensive briefing, and I welcome the participation of the representative of the Republic of Iraq in this meeting. Mr. President, the UAE values the progress achieved by UNITAD during the past 6 months in collecting evidence on crimes committed by the terrorist organization Daesh in Iraq. Some of these crimes may constitute crimes against humanity and crimes of genocide, including investigations into Daesh's use of chemical and biological weapons, sexual violence against women and girls, and the destruction of cultural heritage. We commend as well the team for their efforts in exhuming remains from mass graves. These investigations by UNITAD hold significant importance. However, it is even more important to ensure that UNITAD will hand over the evidence to Iraq so that it can be utilized to carry out trials of Daesh members and to achieve justice. This is why the Council must remain seized of this matter, especially upon the issuance of the Secretary General's anticipated report on January 15th, which will outline the possible ways by which UNITAD can deliver all collected and processed evidence to the Iraqi government, including the comprehensive details of any evidence shared with third countries. Resolution 2379 designates the Iraqi government as the primary recipient of this evidence. The Secretary General's proposals in this regard must be both practical and applicable with full respect for Iraq's sovereignty. In addition, successfully holding Daesh accountable and the subsequent transfer of evidence to Iraq for use in national trials constitute important factors for deterrence of terrorists around the world. This approach serves our collective efforts to prevent the resurgence of this group or the emergence of other more extremist entities. In this context, we support the Iraqi government's efforts to hold Daesh criminals accountable wherever they may be, and we commend the achievements so far in this regard. Many survivors and the victims' families are still waiting for justice. This includes hundreds of people still wondering about the fate of their loved ones. With the growing indications that a large number of Daesh members have fled to other countries, there is need to continue sharing evidence with third countries. This is essential for securing accountability against Daesh members regardless of their location. We welcome the agreement reached between the Iraqi government and UNITAD regarding mechanisms for evidence sharing with third countries, and we also welcome the completion of the first joint case file between the Iraqi investigative judges and UNITAD to support the trial of a Daesh member in a third country in a way that strengthens international criminal justice and contributes to the transfer of expertise to Iraqi authorities. We further urge the team to continue transferring knowledge to Iraqi judges and experts, especially in the field of digital forensics, throughout the remainder of its mandate. We welcome the opening of 7 digital forensic laboratories so far in Iraq, and we commend the team's efforts in digitizing millions of documents and evidence. This digital transformation will enhance the accessibility of evidence for Iraqi judicial authorities. In the next 10 months, it will be critical to complete the procedures for the responsible termination and closure of the team's operations. This process should be guided by a roadmap to be developed by the team in coordination with the Iraqi government by the 15th of March. On the other hand, the team has made strenuous efforts to collect statements from witnesses about a number of crimes. It is crucial to clarify the mechanisms through which these statements can be ultimately delivered to the Iraqi authorities to ensure their optimal utilization while safeguarding the protection of witnesses. We urge that the Council be regularly updated on the progress made in implementing all provisions of Resolution 2697 throughout the remaining period, with special emphasis on the briefing scheduled for June next year. we further reaffirm our support for Iraq's sovereignty, security, stability, and territorial integrity. Thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco al representante.
I thank the representative of the United Arab Emirates. I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Mr. President, I thank Mr. Christian Richer, Special Advisor and Head of the UNITAD, for the valuable information he furnished the Council with today. As part of the international community's efforts to eradicate terrorism, ensuring accountability for crimes committed by Islamic State in Iraq and Levant, including war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, remains pivotal. UNITAD has been supporting the Iraqi-led process on accountability since its inception 5 years ago, and Japan commends its unwavering dedication. Among the wide variety of areas of investigation in which UNITAD made progress in close cooperation with relevant Iraqi authorities during the reporting period, we particularly commend the work accomplished on sexual and gender-based crimes and crimes against children. Continuing this thematic investigation is significant, not only for punishing immediate perpetrators, but also for ending the culture of impunity and helping to eliminate gender-based violence, including sexual violence in conflict. We note that some investigative work is still preliminary, such as the concerning crimes committed against Shia Turkmen women, and we encourage UNITAD to ensure that it continues to build upon what has been found so far. Building the capacities of Iraqi judicial authorities is also critical in order to ensure they can continue their work after UNITAD completes its mandate. We welcome the ongoing close collaboration between UNITAD and the Iraqi judicial authorities on various capacity building initiatives, including joint case building, the digitization of court records, and other technical assistance. As the Special Advisor points out in his report and briefings today, this type of collaboration will serve as a strategic asset for Iraq in continuous combating terrorism once such efforts bear tangible outcomes, though we note this will still take time. We welcome that UNITAD, in consultation with the government of Iraq, has identified modalities for the transfer of evidence with third countries in response to the request of Iraq and as requested by the Security Council in the Resolution 2697. Close collaboration and communication with all relevant ministries and agencies of the Iraqi government are the hallmark of effective mandate implementation by the team. At the same time, it should also be reminded that the shared goal in this dossier for the Iraqi government, UNITAD, and the Security Council is to ensure accountability for crimes committed by ISIL, and that the legacy of UNITAD, which serves this purpose, needs to be preserved. With this, we look forward to a report by the Secretary General and another by the Special Advisor as requested, which will provide the Council with solid foundation to discuss the way forward, bearing in mind the requests by the government of Iraq. I thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco la representante.
I thank the representative of Japan. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Mr. President, I thank Special Advisor Mr. Richer for his briefing and welcome the positive briefing UNITAD has made over the past 6 months. China has all along underscored in Council's previous deliberations that UNITAD is a temporary and transitional arrangement made by the Security Council in support of Iraq's accountability efforts. In September this year, the Council adopted Resolution 2697, which renewed the team for the final 1-year non-extendable term until 17th September 2024. It is our hope that this request will be effectively implemented and the team will consult fully with Iraq, formulate a practical and actionable exit strategy without delay, and complete its withdrawal in a timely and orderly manner. UNITAD should also work to ensure timely and systematic handover of all evidence to the Iraqi government so that evidence can be turned into a powerful weapon to hold terrorists accountable, thus completing the historic task of supporting Iraq's accountability efforts. Recently, UNITAD has reached an agreement with the Iraqi government on the modalities of evidence sharing with third countries. We welcome this. We hope that the team will, as requested, inform the Iraqi government of previously shared evidence files as soon as possible. Mr. President, Iraq is at the forefront of international counter-terror efforts and has made tremendous sacrifices in the fight against Daesh and in the recovery of territories occupied by terrorist and extremist forces. The international community should continue to steadfastly support Iraq in beefing up its counter-terror capacity building, combating terrorism, eliminating terrorist remnants, and consolidating hard-won counter-terror achievements. Thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco al representante.
I thank the representative of China and I give the floor to the representative of Mozambique.
Mr. President, I thank the Special Advisor and Head of the United Nations Investigative Team to promote accountability for crimes committed by Daesh, ISIL, Mr. Christian Richer, and his team for the briefing. I also acknowledge the presence of the permanent representative of Iraq at this meeting. Mr. President, Mozambique commends UNITAD's valuable contribution in promoting accountability for crimes committed by Daesh, Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. UNITAD team's commitment towards the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2379 and 2697 deserves our appreciation. The violent extremist and terrorist acts of the Islamic State and Levant in Iraq continue to threaten international peace and security. In this connection, UNITAD's work in assisting Iraq judiciary is crucial to ensure that there is no impunity for Daesh ISIL perpetrators. Mozambique welcomes the team's milestone reached in all lines of inquiry, including the investigation of specialized cross-sector areas and the investigation of gender-based crimes and crimes against children. International crimes need a substantial amount of time, specialized knowledge, and sufficient funds and resources for investigation, prosecution, and settlement. UNITAD's support to Iraq is fundamental in pursuit of justice for victims and survivors, and accountability for the perpetrators of war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and other heinous crimes. Breaking the cycle of impunity is an important step toward stabilization, reconstruction, and reconciliation in Iraq. Mozambique is extremely appreciative of UNITAD's assistance to Iraq in various forms, including the provision of material and human resources. The vital role of UNITAD in providing training to local staff and national forensic professional is a major factor in enhancing the nation's capacity to counter the global threat that is terrorism. Mr. President, in order to effectively utilize the evidence gathered by UNITAD's team in independent criminal proceeding before Iraq's court, it is also crucial that Iraq establish a sufficient domestic legal framework for the investigation, prosecution, and the adjudication of international crimes. It is our view that the domestication of international criminal law, and the prompt adoption of legislation pertaining to international crimes are crucial in this regard. An essential step forward is the involvement of legal professionals from abroad and Iraq in training about the relationship between domestic and international criminal law. Mr. President, it is difficult to bring Daesh accountable for the horrific crimes it has committed without the cooperation of all pertinent national stakeholders. UNITAD's relationship with national authorities, religious institutions, non-profit organizations, and other groups must be strengthened. Finally, it is critical that UNITAD be supported in its efforts to hold those responsible for the transnational crimes, such as those Daesh has committed in Iraq and throughout the world, accountable. I thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco al representante.
I thank the representative of Mozambique. I now give the floor to the representative of Malta.
I also thank Special Advisor Richer for his report and briefing, and welcome the permanent representative of Iraq to this meeting. Malta commends UNITAD for the progress achieved across its investigative priorities during the reporting period. We recognize that the cooperation afforded by the government of Iraq, the Iraqi judiciary, and the Kurdistan regional government was essential in ensuring such progress. UNITAD's investigative achievements over the past 6 months include the production of an analytical report on sexual violence perpetrated by Daesh against women and girls, and a case assessment report on Daesh's manufacture and use of chemical weapons. We welcome the sharing of both reports with the Iraqi authorities and the team's commitment to sharing additional analytical and structural findings with the Iraqi judiciary. More broadly, Malta appreciates the team's continued partnerships with civil society, victims, survivors, communities, and religious leaders across all aspects of its investigative work. President, we look forward to receiving the Secretary General's report next month on Iraq's request for the transfer of UNITAD's evidence holdings. Our view is that any evidence transfers must be consistent with international human rights law and the team's terms of reference, including UN best practices. Key to overcoming challenges regarding the transfer of evidence is the adoption of a domestic legal framework enabling the prosecution of international crimes, namely genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Malta repeats our call that such legislation should be progressed as a matter of priority and precludes the application of the death penalty in line with UN best practices. UNITAD provides wide-ranging technical assistance and support to the Iraqi authorities, including evidence digitization and preservation, excavation of mass graves, and training to judges. We share UNITAD's views regarding the importance of this collaborative and impactful work, which has received substantial funding from the European Union. We also welcome the swift conclusion of an agreement between the government of Iraq and UNITAD to determine modalities for information sharing with third states, in line with Resolution 2697. This has enabled the team to continue supporting a growing number of national jurisdictions with respect to ongoing investigations and prosecutions. We look forward to receiving the roadmap for the completion of the team's work next March. However, we note that the views expressed in the team's latest reports that UNITAD's mandate will not be completed in a meaningful way by September 24. Although the wheels of justice can turn slowly, we must acknowledge the concrete results achieved by UNITAD over the past 5 years in pursuing accountability for atrocity crimes committed by Daesh in Iraq. In addition, UNITAD's important work continues apace across all aspects of its mandate, including investigations, evidence collection, and capacity building. A drawdown of UNITAD's functions must therefore be gradual and orderly, recognizing also the need to appropriately deal with confidential and sensitive evidence in the team's possession. This includes testimonial evidence from victims and witnesses from vulnerable communities. In concluding, I want to assure you, Special Advisor, of Malta's continuing support of UNITAD's crucial work in ensuring there is no impunity for atrocity crimes committed by Daesh in Iraq. Together, we must ensure the legitimate call for justice of survivors and victims is fulfilled. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta, and I will now make a statement in my quality as representative of Ecuador. I would like to thank the Special Advisor and his team for introducing the 11th report of UNITAD. I would also like to welcome the representative of Iraq to this meeting. The adoption of Resolution 2697 of 2023 last September, through which this Council, taking note of the request of the government of Iraq, decided unanimously to extend the mandate of the Special Advisor and the team until September 2024 only, represents a new stage in the work of UNITAD. In this context, my intervention will focus on three areas of the report. Firstly, we note that whilst UNITAD has begun a process of reappraising its priorities, it continues to accomplish the tasks entrusted to it under Resolution 2379 of 2017. We would also highlight the preparation of reports on the development and use of chemical weapons by Daesh, as well as on sexual violence against women and girls, which have already been passed on to the Iraqi authorities. It's also our understanding that a report on the destruction of Iraqi cultural heritage is being prepared. The information contained in these reports is fundamental to sustain the judicial and police efforts in Iraq in order to bring to justice both those that have perpetrated crimes against various communities in Iraq, which could constitute war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, as well as those who provided assistance and financing for these crimes. Secondly, we support the cooperation between UNITAD and the government of Iraq in the preparation of joint reports on the presumed perpetrators residing in third states and the fact that the first of these cases has been concluded. Likewise, we support the contribution of UNITAD to the development of institutional capacity in Iraq, including the development of a legislative framework on international crimes, support for the victims and witnesses, and the establishment of a centralized digital archive. Equally, the cooperation of UNITAD with the communities affected by Daesh's crimes and links with non-governmental and international organizations continues to be the cornerstone of the efforts of investigation and gathering of evidence. Thirdly, we are happy to hear that UNITAD has informed the Iraqi authorities with regard to evidence that has been shared with third countries, as well as the agreement that was reached in October of 2023 with regard to the modalities that must be followed in such procedures. As the report points out, this is a first step in implementing Resolution 2697, which should be complemented by the presentation of a report by the Secretary-General containing recommendations for the handing over of evidence to the government of Iraq and the roadmap which, in consultation with the government of Iraq, should be drawn up in order to complete UNITAD's mandate. We believe that adequate preparation of these reports will be essential in order to clear up any doubts with regard to UNITAD's activities and the results that it was able to obtain. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the support of my country to UNITAD and its contribution to the rule of law, reconciliation, and sustainable peace in Iraq. I now resume my functions as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of Iraq.
Mr. President, thank you very much for hosting us. I would also like to welcome the distinguished members of the Security Council. I would like to begin as representative of the Republic of Iraq by expressing our thanks to the United Nations and its principal organs and offices through its different resolutions and recommendations. And we would like to thank all international efforts that have supported Iraq in its fight against terrorism and its quest for counterterrorism and the prosecution of terrorists. And I would also like to thank Your Excellency Ambassador José Safir, the representative of Ecuador. I would like to congratulate you on presiding over the Council this month and wish you all the success. I would also like to thank the People's Republic of China for its leadership of the Council last month. I would also like to thank Mr. Christian Richer and his team for the briefing before this August Council through presenting the most important aspects of the 11th report, which included the activities of UNITAD in Iraq during the period covered by the report. And in light of what he has presented, we would like to applaud the mention of promotion of cooperation with the Iraqi judiciary and other Iraqi authorities of the government, and in addition, the paragraphs that are related to the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2697. In this regard, we would like to clarify that the authorities in Iraq did not receive the report at an appropriate time. Therefore, we have not had the time to carefully examine the report and review its findings with the national authorities mentioned in the report, as well as what has mentioned on digital archives in the report. Mr. President, we welcome Resolution 2697, which has included the requests of Iraq included in our letter from the Prime Minister with regards to the handing over of all evidence to the Iraqi government during the final extension of the UNITAD mandate. In this regard, we reiterate our firm position on the extension of the mandate for only 1 year, and I repeat, only 1 year, for the final time that ends in September 2024. Therefore, the government of Iraq continues to attach importance to implement the mandate for the final year and leading to its closure. And during this final year, all evidence must be provided, whether those acquired by the team or those received from Iraq and developed using advanced technology, handing over all this evidence to the Iraqi government to be used before Iraqi courts. The mandate of UNITAD, as per the terms of reference and the resolutions, is centered on the collection, preservation, and storage of evidence on Daesh crimes in Iraq and presenting them for fair trials that will contribute to achieving justice, accountability, and justice for the victims. The team's mandate cannot be reduced to the evidence without using the evidence in national courts contexts. Mr. President, the formation of UNITAD is a unique experience in international cooperation in order to achieve criminal accountability in the most serious crimes on the international level. The threat posed by Daesh and the efforts by UNITAD and its head through the implementation of their mandate, during which they faced difficult circumstances and challenges related to the context within which the investigations were carried out. Accordingly, Iraq continues to support the success of this experience, therefore continuing the mandate of the UNITAD through delivering the evidence to the Iraqi government, which has been collected on its territory, will be the proof of the success of this experience. If this is not achieved, it may weaken states' trust in such mechanisms in the future. Mr. President, the Iraqi government continued to coordinate and cooperate with UNITAD in an ideal manner and provided the facilitation required to guarantee the impartiality and independence of the UNITAD as per Security Council resolutions and as per the terms of reference. The technical authorities have delivered observations that we believe that UNITAD should have taken into consideration within its mandate. The mandate that has required that it provides all the support necessary to the Iraqi government within the respect for Iraqi sovereignty. We have clarified these observations in detail in previous statements before the Council. We reiterate that until this moment, the Iraqi government has not received any evidence from UNITAD that could be used in criminal proceedings. We only received reports and summaries that have no legal value before national courts. Therefore, and through this August Council, the Iraqi government expresses its reservation on the delivery of reports on Daesh crimes. We consider this a contradiction to the Security Council resolutions on the topic and the terms of reference, which have included that UNITAD should deliver the evidence of the Daesh crimes against the Iraqi people in order to achieve accountability and justice. In this context, we seek clarification from UNITAD on the utility and importance of these reports on a legal level, and on what basis were they provided instead of evidence. The two issues are categorically different through their legal use and legal value. In the same context, we would like to clarify that we, as the Iraqi government, feel a great responsibility to achieve justice for the victims and achieve accountability, and to prosecute every individual involved in these crimes, be they individuals or organizations or states. We describe these crimes as the most serious, most heinous throughout human history. Accordingly, the Iraqi government desires every piece of evidence that may achieve justice and accountability. It is a right and a moral and legal duty. Therefore, issuing reports on Daesh crimes and delivering them to Iraq may not amount to the level of ambitions to achieve justice. And therefore, the evidence are required to achieve justice. In particular, if we realize that these reports have no legal effect that can be used or relied upon in the context of criminal prosecutions in this regard, we would like to refer to a very important matter, which are the accounts of witnesses that have not been shared with the Iraqi government, which UNITAD has acquired through implementation of its mandate on Iraqi territory with full support from the Iraqi government. This raises a number of questions and legal issues. And to what extent is such a practice in compliance with the mandate? And what use would these witness accounts be if they are not used in domestic courts? What are the means of remedy for the victims that can be achieved by these witness accounts? This will lead to further impunity and a lack of accountability. In this regard, we would like to indicate that delayed proceedings have allowed members of Daesh to escape outside of Iraq and seek havens, which explains the rise in proceedings in a number of countries that have received refugees who included persons involved in terrorist crimes with Daesh against the Iraqi people. The main reason could be the delay in prosecution and accountability and use of the evidence developed by UNITAD against the Daesh members. This clearly led to a delay in justice and a delay in justice for the victims. In this context and within the mandate of UNITAD, we emphasize that the main mandate constitutes carrying out court proceedings in Iraq. Mr. President, the government is prepared to share evidence with all states after the closure of the UNITAD mission in September 2024. The evidence that will be owned by Iraq and the ones that we have delivered to UNITAD and that represent close to 90% of the evidence possessed by the UNITAD should lead in the end to reach the government once again and will be used to achieve national accountability as well as international accountability, and will support international efforts to achieve justice against everyone who perpetrated, supported, or funded Daesh crimes. This will lead to a lack of safe haven to be available to the Daesh members who were able to escape. With regards to evidence shared with third states, the government has responded quickly to implementation of paragraph 5 of Resolution 2697 in order to continue the evidence sharing with third states. At the same time, the paragraph clearly stated the requirement to communicate to the government of Iraq details of evidence sharing with third states. Therefore, we would like to emphasize that we are strongly interested in the nature and kind of evidence shared with third states, not only their categories or titles. And we are also interested strongly in the evidence developed through the use of advanced technology in processing the evidence received from Iraq throughout the 6 years of the mandate so far. Until this moment, we have not been informed of the evidence as per paragraph 5 of the mentioned resolution. We would like to indicate that the UNITAD activities include evidence sharing with third states through the support of the government of Iraq as per the mandate. And this was the essence of Iraq's acceptance of the UNITAD mandate. Mr. President, we emphasize once again our commitment to cooperate with UNITAD and to provide the support through the National Coordinating Committee, which is mandated with providing support to UNITAD. And we will do so as per Resolution 2697. And in respect for our sovereignty and jurisdiction over crimes committed within our borders, we further emphasize that we intend to cooperate with all member states and will share evidence with third states as necessary. In conclusion, Mr. President, we thank you and thank all states that have supported Iraq in addressing and countering terrorism and presenting criminals to national prosecution, and we thank Mr. Richer and his team for their efforts over 6 years and for highlighting the magnitude of the crimes suffered by the Iraqi people at the hands of Daesh. And we hope that these efforts will culminate with the delivery of all evidence to the Iraqi government and to achieve the closure as per the time frame. And we wish Mr. Richer and his team all the success in the future. I would like to clarify as well in relation to what has been mentioned on evidence of use of Daesh of chemical and biological weapons. I would like to emphasize that Iraq is a party to the CWC on chemical weapons as well as the Convention on Biological Weapons, and we are committed to presenting reports of transparency on an annual basis, and we annually receive inspection teams from OPCW, and we provide all the facilitation necessary. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Iraq. There are
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.